Welcome to Football Today team profiles and previews. And today we are looking at the Indianapolis Colts, who came in our power rankings at 21st after a 9-8 season. Offensively, we're 10th in scoring last year, 17th in EPA per play. Defensively, 28th in scoring and 19th in EPA. Head coach Shane Steichen's second year after coming over from the Eagles as their offensive coordinator. Jim Bob Cooter's second season after being the Jags passing game coordinator and the Eagles consultant. And then Gus Bradley returns as a third season. Was a Frank Reich carryover after being the Raiders and Chargers DC after being the Jags head coach. Justin, this team overachieved their quarterback situation with their offensive coaching last year. Anthony Richardson returns from injury with a talented roster, and the Colts feel confident that they can compete.
I love what the Indianapolis Colts are building, Bobby Skinner. I think they won 9 games last year when they very much should not have won 9 games last year. They were maybe 3 or 4 bad throws away, bad Gardner Minshew throws away from defeating the Houston Texans on a national stage to earn a playoff berth and play the Cleveland Browns in the playoffs just 1 week later. And who knows how much we're still talking about how we're hyped for CJ Stroud and the Houston Texans and D'Amico Ryans and everything like that. But I'll tell you what, because they made the playoffs and they won a playoff game, the hype is more real for them. But the Colts were, Gardner Minshew was bad, and the Colts were bad, a couple bad Gardner Minshew plays away from kind of ruining that little feel-good story. It was one of my favorite off seasons. They didn't do anything flashy. They kept their own. They're building a team that can sustain success with good players and key spots. And the only question that they need to answer before they make some final splash moves is, do they have their franchise quarterback?
So I want to burst the Colts bubble a little bit.
Oh, no.
Here's the thing. If Anthony Richardson stays healthy, I'm not bursting this bubble. I'm really excited about them. I think keeping Gus Bradley on staff was a horrible decision, right? There should have been that was a GM decision, right? Kirsten Ballard talked about it. Like that was, a GM decision of like, oh, well, we didn't give you, we went so young in the secondary. What else could you have done? But we'll talk about that. I know everyone loves the Joe Flacco story, but I'm not convinced that he is this upgrade to Gardner Minshew as a backup quarterback, right? And that's not me being a fan of Gardner Minshew. That's me being like, this Joe Flacco Browns thing's got a little out of control. Like he threw like multiple interceptions essentially every single week. And the Richardson health is like a huge worry, right?
It is.
And you're going to be putting him in harm's way, right? Like in his full games, he had 10 carries in each of those games. He had an AC joint sprain that put him out for the year. He had injuries at Florida. Like you can't take those design runs away from him, or he's not who you drafted, right? And you think like, oh, you look good. Well, guess what? He had 4 design run touchdowns in 4 games. Like that's where I'm. If he can stay healthy, and all of these past injuries are just that past injuries, then I feel a lot better about them. But I worry they're a Richardson injury away from a kind of a lost season.
No, and they are. I mean, because here's the thing, Bobby. The Colts have been in a purgatory since Andrew Luck retired, right? That's where this Colts franchise has been. Now, I think roster-wise and core-wise, they're set up now than they've ever been. But even going back to like 2018, like they still have, you even look back at that roster. Like some would argue that the Colts back in 2018, it's been a long time since then, but Colts back in 2018, that they had a really good core and a really good roster core, and it's taken Chris Ballard, I think, a couple of years to kind of rebuild it, but they've been stuck in this quarterback purgatory since Andrew Luck retired of trying to find the guy that they're going to plug in, because they haven't been bad enough to tank for a guy like Andrew Luck or to tank for Caleb Williams or do whatever. Their roster has been good enough to survive. Their coaching has been good enough over the years. It's just that they can't find who they want to find. And they did.
And I love Richardson, right?
Yeah.
I would have drafted him 10 times out of 10 if I was the Indianapolis Colts. Just I'm really worried about that. But let's talk about Richardson.
Yes, please.
They made the passing game very simple for him last year, right? RPOs, play action, screen game, and stuff. And like I thought he did really well with what they asked him. Right now, there's some I need to see him. I want to see him let the deep and intermediate part of the field develop a little more. Right, he'll scramble rather than get to the backside of his progressions. But when the read was clear, he got it out on time with good anticipation, touch, accuracy. It looked really good, and they obviously did all the design run stuff really well. And I thought he used Josh Downs well. Getting the ball to Michael Pittman Jr. Like I thought he looked good and it was exciting, but obviously he missed the time. So just talking football wise, not his health or whatever. I am super excited for this Colts offense, right? Like you have Michael Pittman Jr., who's this top dog. Like it's remarkable how high his catch rate has been for a wide receiver with that size and the QB play he has had with Minshew, Matt Ryan, Sam Ehlinger, Nick Foles, Carson Wentz. And then like Josh Downs is a really nice piece, right? Like he's going to hold down the slot for you. 52 of his 68 catches came within 10 yards, which is a great outlet for Anthony Richardson. Second highest target share within that range in the NFL, seventh lowest average at the target. Like he's a huge key for this offense. And then you go out, get Adonai Mitchell, and then have Alex Pierce with him on the opposite side with that running game in this offensive line. Like it's a nice situation. And if there's any QB who I'd like with this coaching staff too, with Shane Steichen on offense, this could be phenomenal this year.
Richardson turned 22 in May. He's younger than every quarterback who went in round one of this year's draft besides Drake May and J.J. McCarthy. What was one of the things that was most impressive to me? A 7.7% sack rate that I think will only get lower with an offensive line that I view as a top 5 pass blocking unit in the NFL. I think Richardson took a lot of sacks week 1 against the Jaguars, and then the sacks went down from there because I think he had some learning lessons, things that he learned, took it away from week 1, and then looked to improve it. And why I think that's going to go down is because I think Richardson is going to limit negative plays while hunting for big plays down the field. We had Nate Tyson, and he pointed out how Richardson, with the short sample size, he also wrote a Yahoo Sports article on this too, that I read in preparation for that interview, pointed out how Richardson, even with the short sample size, he was doing some advanced QB stuff, baiting defenders with his eyes, willing to take the underneath stuff, and then hit the defense with the haymaker when it's there. And I think he compared Richardson to like a fighter. You take the jab when it's there, you take the jab, and then boom, the haymaker is going to be there, and Richardson is going to take it because he wants to take it, and he knows that it's going to be there, and he's also going to do what he can with his eyes to open up those things down the field, and including, like Bobby, the pocket's collapsing on some throws, and he's like throwing. I think I made a YouTube short on this on JM Football where his feet are off the ground, and he's launching a ball deep down the field. We know that he can break the pocket and throw on the run, so it's a weapon. It's a weapon. He's plus 3,000 right now. MVP odds right now in the DraftKings Sportsbook, I threw $5 on it because that's how confident I am that this could be that good.
And he's a guy who's barely played football too, right? Like he didn't play a whole ton for Florida until that last year. And like I was impressed. Like I saw a guy who actually went through his progressions. He wasn't this guy where it's like, oh, this is a guy who was just big, athletic, throws to his first read. Like, no, he was a guy who sat in the pocket, went through his progressions, and then ran when he needed to, but also, this big arm, but like accuracy is really good. Like you mentioned, he throws with good touch. So there's so many good things, and I think he'll grow confidence wise this year. I'm not going to keep harping on his health, but it does. That part just really worries me because you can't take the design QB runs out of this offense. No. You can't take that away from his game. Maybe you go from 10 a game to 7 a game, but that's still a lot of hits that a quarterback's going to be taking. Especially on 3rd and 4th down, those are going to be key moments. They try and do that stuff with him. But I am really excited for Anthony Richardson. I'm just hoping he could stay healthy because to me, that's obviously the key for this team. And again, I think Josh Downs is a really nice piece. And then you have that top dog in Pittman. And then I think anything you get out of Adonai Mitchell is kind of a bonus.
Yes.
When you look at this offense right now.
Yeah, you have Pittman that plays like a bully. He averaged a career high 2.04 yards per route run last season. Exceptional contested catch receiver. He knows how to separate despite him not being the biggest and the fastest guy. Now, again, it's so tough to evaluate Richardson because it was with the very very low sample size. The target share that Pittman got with Gardner Minshew was much higher with Minshew than it was with Richardson, and it was the same thing with Downs. Target share that he got under Minshew was higher than what it was with Richardson. I'm not taking too much stock into that. This is going to be an offense that once we see a full sample size of a season, I think those guys are going to get the ball. But I agree with you. I think anything you get out of AD Mitchell is a bonus, and he's going to be, I think, even from day one, just like a target deep down the field because I know Richardson's going to be able to put the ball on him.
Yeah, and again, you mentioned the offensive line. Like their entire starting five performed well last year. Credit to
And it's returning.
Yeah, credit to Tony Sperano Jr., right? Like Ryan Kelly, like for pass blocking efficiency numbers, Ryan Kelly was first for centers. Quentin Nelson was fourth, and Will Fries is 25th for guards. Braden Smith was seventh for tackles, and Bernard Raymond was 27th out of 73 guys. Like every single one of them, by the numbers, was above average, with Fries probably being the weak point out of the five. And like you said, they are returning, and that's another thing about this team is they didn't add a lot outside of obviously the draft, but they didn't lose anybody, right?
Right.
Like if Anthony Richardson stays healthy, like the only good piece they lost was Zach Moss at running back, and when you have Jonathan Taylor, you're going to want to give him the bulk of the carries, right? And I know Taylor's missed 13 games in the last two seasons, but he's only 25 years old and 2 years removed from setting the league on fire with 1,800 rushing yards. So you think of like how they're going to do some of the run game with Richardson and Taylor together. Like there's just, and you think of Shane Steichen that last year with the Eagles, how it's like what Jalen Hurts is like, they just had answers for everything. Like you do this, we're going to run the ball. You do this, we're going to throw a quick game. You do this, we're going to throw over the top to AJ Brown. They don't have that type of talent, but it is like a 2022 Eagles light offensive personnel.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I want to get into, where Shane Steichen, great for the Eagles in 2022 and the Colts in 2023, and particularly his game scripts in the first half, where the Colts were 9th in EPA per play in the first quarter, 4th in EPA per rush. In the first half overall, they were 14th in EPA per play. They were 8th in first quarter points and 9th in second quarter points. So the game script that Shane Steichen has is an advantage, and especially when we're talking about a year last year where, hey, it was the first year of a totally new coaching staff, new everything. They shouldn't have won 9 games last year, especially when you lose your starting quarterback and your first round quarterback. I can easily see, Bobby. I know we're talking about Anthony Richardson, we're talking about these weapons. I can easily see this Colts team building up to be a 49ers or Ravens type of team. Get out to early leads, be explosive, then kill the opponent in the second half with running the ball and that offensive line behind Jonathan Taylor. I think you felt the impact of Shane Steichen leaving Philadelphia. I mean, I remember back in 2022, Bobby, when we were experimenting with some stuff on JM Football, you pointing out your best runs of the week, and the Eagles were consistently on there. I don't think they would have been on there last year. The designs that he's able to create, Braden Smith, I think, is one of the best run blockers in the National Football League. He's just so athletic. He gets out of his stance so freaking fast. And Jonathan Taylor is still Jonathan Taylor, and he's going to be hopefully, coming off on an off season where he is fully healthy. I think this is a dangerous even run blocking unit as well, and I think that will help make Anthony Richardson's life a lot easier.
So let's talk about the defense. And this is the biggest pop in the balloon, right? Like the Anthony Richardson health stuff. But again, I'm not going to sit here and talk about, well, this guy gets hurt. Like there's not much you can do to control that. And this is why, like when we did our head coaching rankings, I actually slid Shane Steichen down a little bit to where I would have before. They gave Gus Bradley a pass because of how young the secondary was. I think he should be gone, right? They have the lowest blitz rate in the NFL. And they are just the ultimate bend, don't break defense. They work these cover 3 like they are an easy, like offensive coordinators, or whatever, like when they, do reading articles and stuff, is like they are like an easy defense to prepare for. They are a flat out easy defense to prepare for. last year, right? And you're like, well, they were fifth in sacks last year, but it came by committee. They were set 22nd in pressure rate. I don't expect them to keep up that sack rate that they had last year. DeForest Buckner is still a top dog in the NFL in the middle, and they have a nice like 5-headed rotation at edge, which will keep them fresh. They added Lawtu in the draft, and then you have Samson Obakam, Kwity Paye, Dio, Odiembo, and then Tyquan Lewis. All four of those guys had 5+ sacks. I think Dio, I think it's Dio. He's probably the best. He's the number one guy in line for regression. He just had horrible pressure numbers. I just think Gus Bradley is a disadvantage for that defense, and I don't think they're talented enough to make up for it.
No, and this is where my notes on the Colts start to run out, where I have a good amount of notes and a good amount of thoughts on their front. Zaire Franklin is still a dude, but they have a young and unproven secondary. And I even texted Dalton Feely to our resident Colts fan. Tell me a little bit about the Colts, and tell me some things that may be able to stick out. And he's just like, that secondary is young, and they need them to step up.
Yeah, and I mean, last year they allowed wide receivers to have career days against them, like Juju Brents. I like Juju Brents. He's a little banged up, but he's in year 2. Jalen Jones is a year 2 7th rounder, right? And you have Kenny Moore, the vet, and the nickel. And then in the back end, you have Nick Cross, who's about as undisciplined as a safety can be. Really athletic. He's a typical Colts draft pick, but he doesn't know how to play the safety position. Julian Blackman, who's he's basically just a box safety at this point. And then Rodney Thomas, a third-year player, was their deep safety. It's just a very young secondary. I think it's a front that overperformed last year, so they're going to need Lawtu to step in there and be really good right away for them to, keep in line with that sack production with DeForest Buckner. And, I mean, the linebacker room is okay, I guess. Like, they're just a very young and not over... They're a very young defense that doesn't have a bunch of like promising spots either. Like Juju Brents can turn into something. Lawtu, obviously he's going to get sacks for them, no doubt. And then DeForest Buckner, but where are the guys on this defense? You're like, they're going to grow into really good players.
No. I mean, they have $25 million in cap space right now. This is where, like, how do you feel about their safeties? Like, do you think like adding a Justin Simmons is still a free agent?
They'd be a perfect fit for them.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Or even making an aggressive move, even at the. I know this is the NFL, isn't the NBA or the MLB, and you don't really do this. But even making like if you feel like you have a team, Anthony Richardson's healthy, we're booming and we're going, making an aggressive move for a cornerback and giving up a draft
I could see them doing it at corner, but the comment that Chris Ballard had at the end of the year is like we made a decision to give him a young in the secondary,
and they didn't improve it.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is I don't see the year 2 of that. But like, all right, let's bring in some vets. Like, I think they're like, okay, now these guys are all going to develop. Which again, some may develop, some may not develop, and some may not develop to where some that do develop may not develop to where you want them to. Like, it's just, and again, they're a defensive coordinator who I view as a disadvantage as Gus Bradley. Like, I think he's one of the easiest defensive coordinators to prepare for in the NFL. They do not put any fear in you offensively. You know what they're running, and they're not there's some teams what they're running, and what they're running is coming the fuck after you. That's not the Colts. They are going to sit back, bend, don't break, and they're going to kind of let you dictate terms on offensively, and they don't have the talent to run that type of defense. So this is the defense I'm really, really low on. I mean, the numbers back it up last year too, right? They were 28th in scoring, 16th in passing yards, which wasn't bad, but 20th in yards per attempt, 24th in rushing. They're just an offense that, they're just a defense where if you're an offensive coordinator game planning, like this is a great week. Like we get to run whatever we want, basically.
No, but they're dangerous in the regard of they can force negative plays. They were 5th in the NFL in tackles for loss. You mentioned that they were
5th in sacks.
They were 5th in sacks, but they had the lowest blitz percentage in the NFL.
Yes.
So them again, they don't get pressure. They were 22nd in pressure rate. But them having the lowest blitz percentage in the NFL, being 5th in sacks, and there's not even a guy here that there's not a guy that like inspires
But
fear
that's the issue, though. Is like,
besides
okay,
DeForest
you're gonna
Buckner.
have Kwity Paye's gonna play it. Like I like Kwity Paye, but you're gonna have Odiembo. He's gonna do what he did last year. Like that's not gonna happen again. And again, you have okay guys. Samson Ibaka, Kwity Paye, and Taekwon Lewis are okay guys.
But there's
Yeah,
so many of them. That's the thing, though. Where
it's a nice. It's not a bad unit. I'm not sitting here saying it's a bad unit, but that's not a good enough unit to make up for the lack of coaching. The lack of coaching and that secondary. If you had good coaching and a halfway decent secondary, I'd be a lot higher on it. To me, that's just not a group up front that I'm trusting to fix us.
And
like you mentioned, what they did last year with a low blitz rate, and they were still 28th in scoring.
Yeah, and that's with them trying to help out their secondary, right? Low blitz rate. We're going to drop more guys back into coverage and try and help out that secondary. So, hey, man, I could say it. They need to force. This is a team that needs to get turnovers. They need to produce negative plays via tackles for loss and sacks. I mean, that's got to be their identity, right? Where, hey, we're going to sustain drives. We're going to allow drives to sustain, stay on the field, and either, be a really good red zone defense. Let me check their red zone numbers really quick. They weren't very good. They were 17th, so they were middle of the pack as a red zone defense. And then if we force the negative play and if we get a sack, then that's going to be the drive killer. That's the Colts' MO on defense. Agreed?
Yeah, I just don't like that MO.
No, it's not. It's not an attacking. It's not an attacking MO on defense. No, not at all.
Just again with that talent. They have one of the smallest new additions and losses. They added Joe Flacco and Raekwon Davis. They lost Gardner Minshew and Zach Moss. I would say a little bit of a downgrade at backup QB. I think Moss is a better player than Raekwon Davis, but they have Jonathan Taylor. So I'd say a push there. The draft class, you have Latu, Adonai Mitchell, Matt Goncalves, the tackle out of Pittsburgh, Tanner Bortolini, the center guard out of Wisconsin, Anthony Gold, wide receiver, Jalen Carleys, Jalen Simpson, Micah Abraham, and John Lawloo. The guys in the fifth on I'm not familiar with outside of Jalen Simpson. They are a team that drafts offensive linemen that I'm not the biggest fan of and develops them. So I'm not going to write off those two offensive linemen.
You can't.
Latu, I think, is going to be a good player for them. I would have went Verse or Turner before him. And then Adonai Mitchell at 52nd. I think that's a perfect Colts fit, and I think he's going to do really well there.
But with the Latu pick, they like drafting guys that are older and more pro ready. Like I think
I think he'll be their second best guy up front after Buckner.
Yeah, I mean, even look at like a guy like Bernard Raymond, Bobby. I was shocked to see this is his third year and he's 27 years old. So he's an old dude, and that's what the Ravens like to do. They like to draft these guys that are old, big, tall, athletic, fast, and ready to go as pros. So I'm not gonna. It's tough to doubt what Chris Ballard's doing and the type of team that he's built. And if Latu can be a kind of impact player,
they need him to be really good this year.
They do, because I'm not high on any of those guys. Like I think
and if you're going to keep that rotation going like crazy, then why'd you draft Latu?
Right,
15th overall.
Yeah, I think some of these guys play like madmen, but what I would feel a lot better about even this defense overall if they had that one guy that was that true difference maker besides DeForest Buckner, but especially coming off the edge to go with him that can just win and be a dude. I think that would change kind of the general feel of the defense a little bit.
Yep. All right, who's your X factor?
I can't say Anthony Richardson's health, right?
No.
I'll say Latu because we just talked about it.
All right. Second time you win a first round rookie as your X factor.
There you go.
Disgusting. My X factor.
But really, it is. I mean, it is Anthony. I didn't talk about it enough. No matter how high I am on the Indianapolis Colts, like I think that there is a chance, a slight chance, but there's a chance that Anthony Richardson could have like an MVP type season. I do recognize that if he goes down, like the season's over for the Colts.
Yeah,
it's over.
Well, I'll mention that in the over under. X factor for me is Juju Brents. All right, second year corner, big physical cornerback. He fits the scheme like a glove. If he can develop to what they think he can be, that alleviates some of your secondary worries. Over under 8.5 wins. I'm going under. If Richardson stays healthy, I'm going over, but I don't forecast that, so I am putting this team at the under.
I'm going over. I think they could compete for the division.
I think they can compete for the division too.
Yeah.
I think the AFC South is a lot more fun than people give it credit for. Like,
all four teams are extremely competitive.
Yep. All right. That was the Indianapolis Colts, and this is Football Today.